Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nicky Rias, and we are back once again talking college football. It is a late night after dark Mountain West showdown between San Jose State and Utah State happening this Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. local out there in Logan, Utah. And we got ourselves another guest on the show to talk Spartans and Aggies. He's got the state of Utah on lockdown, covering Utah State football and basketball. Jason Walker. Jason, thanks for coming on the podcast midweek here and to talk Spartans and Aggies. We should have a good one out there at Maverick Stadium.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good one. I know matchups between the Aggies and Spartans have been lopsided on either direction, to be quite honest, especially in recent years. So looking forward to a good Friday night matchup. It'll be a little different there.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting matchup for SJSU, but I think it just from a scheduling standpoint, it's pretty interesting as well because they were just up in Laramie, Wyoming, where weird things happen, and we saw that last weekend. They come back to San Jose, to practice and do all of their stuff. They got home at midnight on Sunday, and then they got to go fly back to altitude on a short week. It's just one of those interesting scheduling spots that they never really go through every single year, and they got to go through it. So I'm interested to see how that pans out in that regard. But you talked about how it's kind of been one-sided. This has been a house of horrors for San Jose State out there in Maverick Stadium. The all-time series is pretty even, 21-20-1. Favoring SJSU. The last time the Spartans and Aggies faced off was back in 2023. That was a 42-21 win for San Jose State in San Jose. Chevin Cordero versus McKay Hillstead at quarterback. And, now, this is a place where the Spartans haven't favored too well. They've lost 5 in a row here. They haven't won in Logan, Utah since 2007. It just seems like, everybody kind of owns each other in the Mountain West. Like there's just these weird, I guess, head-to-head series where you're like, whoa, this team really owns one another. This is kind of one of those as of late here with the Spartans and Aggies.
Yeah, there certainly are a lot of series. Utah State has those where they've been on either side. Like for instance, Boise State kind of owns Utah State. The Aggies, they've obviously been pretty good in this series against San Jose, but they were also pretty good against Hawaii. I think they had 8 straight wins over the Warriors, and I think by an average of like 26 points, I think was the average. They hadn't lost to the Warriors since 2010 or thereabouts, but just lost to them last week. And heck, with the Spartans, I think it was 10 games in a row, 2009 to 2022, if I'm checking my notes right. And then like I said, I mentioned it's been lopsided, but it's been lopsided on both sides, where San Jose obviously got the win, doubling up the Aggies. So tides can turn pretty quickly in college football.
Yeah, they sure can, especially with all the roster turnover that these teams have these days and coaches dipping and going somewhere else. And all of a sudden, what turns into a successful season, one year you got a new regime and then you're starting from ground zero the next year. So it's wild out there in the landscape right now. That's for sure. Utah State, they're 3-3 overall. They're 1-1 in the Mountain West. You guys bring in Bronco Mendenhall year 1 out there in Utah State to kind of turn the program around and get them, back to their winning ways. Just what has Bronco, just brought here in just year 1? I know he brings Kevin McGiven, the OC, kind of brings in his staff as well, but just what has he brought here? Because everywhere he's been so successful, and I have to say 3-3, thus far. I mean, I would say that's probably about right, just because I had high praise for the Aggies in the preseason. But just where do you value this team right now? And is this kind of where you had them chalked up 6 games in?
Yeah, pretty much. I think at this point I expect them to be 3-3 or 4-2. If they'd have won Hawaii, which I kind of had as a coin flip game, and well, it landed on tails for them in that one. So yeah, Bronco Mendenhall's brought in culture, stability. Not that the Aggies were completely unstable, though there had been some off the field concerns, especially with the way Blake Anderson ended up leaving the team, the former head coach there. But good fundamentals on offense and defense. They haven't hit their peak really on either side of the ball yet, but they've come fairly close on offense. Kevin McGivern's been doing pretty solid work for the Aggies with the offense. But yeah, it's like there's some wrinkles to work out, but what you're seeing is a solid foundation being laid of culture, fundamentals, do the little things. And so they're working through all that. They have like 80 something new players. So it's teaching all of those players the culture, the system, everything. So it's just getting all that figured out. And so year one might be a little bit messy, and it has been a little bit. Um, and so ultimately, it's kind of the fan base is learning some patience. The Hawaii game kind of taught some patience. The Aggies aren't going to be year one wonders. At least doesn't look like it. But we're seeing the fundamentals and some notable improvements in certain areas. Just haven't put it all together yet.
Sure. And the 44-26 loss at Hawaii. You had the extra week to prepare for it. You guys were coming off the bye. You get to fly out to the island as early as you wanted to. Some teams value it as distractions. Other teams just take it as a business trip. I mean, I guess what went wrong in that game in particular, I know it was late night for everybody for that game. But, I mean, you said it was a coin flip game. I know, the wise guys in Vegas had it as a coin flip game, but I mean, just a trip that they don't really take all too often. And, they got outscored 20-6 in the second half. The wheels just kind of fell off there.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about coming off a bye week. I mean, both teams actually, Hawaii and Utah State, were coming off a bye, so there wasn't an advantage one way or the other. Though, funnily enough, Utah State wanted to fly out a little earlier. They were planning on arriving like Thursday morning, local time in Hawaii, but their flight got delayed. And so they were supposed to arrive there, have some free time for the players, a walk through at the stadium, bunch of different things. So they basically had to cancel. They ended up having a lot of those walkthroughs in Maverick Stadium here in Logan. And then they flew out, arrived there basically 24 hours before game time was, 24, 30 hours before game time is when they touched down in Honolulu, in Hawaii. So the logistics side didn't go particularly well for them, but setting that aside, the game, obviously they struggled where they did all right in the first half. They were where they wanted to be at the end of the first half. Obviously things didn't go perfectly. Giving up the touchdown at the end of the first half where they would have had a 2017 lead would have been massive. But as Bronco Mendenhall said in the press conference on Monday, they were pretty much where they wanted to be, or he might have said after the game, but they were where they wanted to be within one score. Things just kind of fell apart in the second half. And in particular, their inability to get pressure on Micah Elahado, where they sacked him 5 times, but most of that was in the first half. I think they only sacked him once in the second half and only got like 4 or 5 pressures on him late in the game. And 4 or 5 pressures sounds a lot, but he dropped back to pass like 63 times. So you got to get to him more often than just 4 or 5 times when he's passing that many times in the game. So the defense just kind of fell apart a little bit, couldn't stop Hawaii, and then the offense started turning things over. The final 3 drives for the Aggies on offense were a fumble, turnover on downs, and an interception. Maybe not quite in that order, but you had 3 turnovers essentially, which only made it all the easier for Hawaii because 2 of their fourth quarter touchdowns, I think, started within 55 yards of a touchdown. One of them, they gave them the ball on like the 30-yard line. So the offense didn't make it any easier for the defense, and then the defense obviously had its own struggles.
Well, meanwhile, for San Jose State, I mean, this has been a team where, they were projected high on the preseason polls. Everyone talked about them having the quote unquote favorable schedule in the Mountain West this year. I mean, they've taken some losses that they shouldn't. You can ask the fan base that, you can ask the coaching staff and several different coaches that they're coming off a brutal loss versus Wyoming, losing 35-28. Just a team that's 2-4 overall, 1-2 in Mountain West. Coach Ken Niumatalolo says, hey, if we make some field goals, we could be standing up here, with our season completely different, standing at 5-1 potentially. But just too many mistakes in that game versus Wyoming. They led 28-14 at halftime. I mean, Wyoming, their 2 first half touchdowns, was on a busted coverage for a 35-yard score and a special teams kick return. They weren't really doing too much offensively in the first half. Walker Eget their San Jose State quarterback gets injured in the third quarter, ended up returning for the final two drives, but I would very much say that, he's questionable for this game. And then, like I said, earlier, Jason, just weird things happen out there in War Memorial Stadium. Like they just have this magic, this Cowboys team. I mean, they had a pick six that went off of the Spartan lineman, and it just bounced perfectly in the linebacker's hands, Braden Johnson. And then, you know, San Jose State just kind of had this revolving door at the field goal, the place kicker position. They're 4 for 12 on field goals. They go 0 for 2 with their new kicker, Matthias Brown, who hasn't attempted a field goal up to that point heading into Laramie, Wyoming. It's just been all over the place, defensively and special teams wise for San Jose State. I don't know how much you've caught this team. I know they've had some national TV spots, but for what a lot of people thought this could be a magical season for San Jose State, this is almost like must-win scenario for them right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the similarities between Utah State and San Jose State. More so in recent weeks. In a lot of the broad strokes for the whole season, there aren't as much because San Jose had a bit more expectations than the Aggies. But when you look at the last game or so, where Utah State coming off a game where they felt they should have won, San Jose, obviously felt like they should have been able to beat Wyoming. And I know weird things do happen up there in Laramie. Utah State's been a victim of that too, or dang near a victim sometimes. But yeah, and heck, even down to the random aspect of Bryson Barnes got injured against Hawaii too and came back during the game. So just these random similarities and parallel lines between some of these games, and even a second half collapse where you give up a lot of points at the end, get outscored by a lot. So. And even down to the fact this is going to feel like a must-win game, maybe for different reasons. Like with San Jose, you're trying to get back to that, anticipating where you're going to contend for the Mountain West, or like at least be mathematically in contention, late in the season, where that was the kind of the preseason expectation is be there, give yourself a chance. And San Jose obviously has a chance to still be there. They've only got one loss in conference play, but for Utah State, where there weren't really any preseason expectations of contending. I mean, that's always the hope and the dream, and the players are gunning for that. But for Utah State, it's about bowl eligibility. If they lose this game to San Jose, what are the winnable games left on the schedule? They only need 3, but you have New Mexico. That's looking like a much tougher game than maybe we're anticipating. Nevada might be a free win, without Nevada's playing. But then you got Fresno State, UNLV, Boise. Like, it gets really tough for the Aggies at the end of the season. And I know Fresno, they're slipping up a little bit, so maybe that'll be slightly easier than anticipated, but that's made up for by the fact that New Mexico is going to be harder than expected. So, this is going to be probably one of the 3 most winnable games. I don't say that to downgrade San Jose, but it's going to be tricky. And of course, if San Jose gets back to playing to their preseason expectations, then San Jose probably should win this game. But yeah, for Utah State, they're looking at this like, if you don't win this game, bowl eligibility is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, and SJSU 1-1 heading into this one in Mountain West play, which would most definitely need a win here to be in that Mountain West championship conversation. You touched on Bryson Barnes, at quarterback. Want to dive into a little bit more into him. Man, this is just a fun player to watch. He's his second year at Utah State. Prior to that, he was with the Utah Utes. He was backing up Cam Rising, and got some spots in there with the injury-prone Cam Rising out there in Salt Lake City. But what he's done, just to revitalize, this offense. I remember his 2 games at the back end of last year. I know the season was, it was not the greatest season for the Aggies, a whole bunch of stuff going on, but he really showed some sign of light on what could be, something that, Aggie fans can really hang their hat on for this year. And, he's showing that. He's completing 64% of his passes, over 1,300 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Him as a runner is just an absolute weapon. I mean, 6 touchdowns on the ground. Just what does he bring to the table here? Because that dual threat capability, when you look at it, I mean, he's the best thing going right now in the Mountain West at the quarterback position in that regard.
I think, as the kids say, he's got that dog in him. Like that might be the best way to put it. Just because, is he one of the best throwers, technically speaking? Not really. Is he the fastest? Not really. Is he the most elusive? Sometimes. But he just has enough of all of those things. He's a good enough thrower. He's got a good enough arm. He's got some athleticism. He can outrun a few guys. So it's not like he's slow and bumbling out there, but he can just go out there and make big plays however he's going to do it. He might scramble for 15. He'll throw one deep, or he'll find a receiver. I think he's actually made massive improvements as a passer this year, because before he was like really iffy on his accuracy, but I think that's where Kevin McGivern and this whole offensive staff have really built a good system around him to take advantage of what he can do. And then he's gotten better. Like the coaches talked about, hey, he's better than we were expecting him to be. The growth that he's made. So as a passer, he's even better than he was last year. And then as a runner, you mentioned those two games at the end of last year, kind of caught some teams off guard. Maybe they weren't ready for him. San Diego State, especially, where he put up 193 yards, and San Jose was defending the quarterback like Spencer Petras was still in there, and Spencer Petras, runs about as fast as I do. So they maybe weren't ready, but then he goes and does almost the same thing against Colorado State, where he has like 180 yards, I think. So he ran for almost 400 yards across two straight games, and he's not putting up those volume numbers this year, but he's having an impact on the ground where he can get 40, 50 yards against you. He does have the 128 yards against McNeese, but that's an FCS team. So he can make big plays on the ground, scramble to get first downs. And that's something that he can certainly try and pull out against San Jose State.
Yeah, and if I know the audience out in San Jose has heard me mention it a bunch, that they just typically don't do good against the mobile quarterbacks, right? It's just like
I don't know who does do good against mobile quarterbacks.
True. That is true. They're, man, especially a guy like Bryson Barnes. Nobody's really been able to stop him, like in a sense, right? Like he's been able to have success versus pretty much everybody. Like from what I saw, like I was very impressed with what he did with Vanderbilt. Out in Nashville, like they were able to put up points. The skill position players, because I think a lot of people were like, hey, we're so used to Jalen Royals and Terrell Vaughn and, all the running back pipeline that you guys have. This is kind of a new group, right? Braden Pagan, Brady Boyd, tight end Brock Lane's been there for some time. I think he's a reliable red zone target. Miles Davis is having a good year. Just this is kind of a new group, and at that skill position players, just what have you liked across the board within the pass catchers?
Yeah, it is pretty much entirely a new group, at least especially with the wide receivers and even running backs, because I think they only had one player coming back on this year's team who had ever caught a pass at Utah State, and that was Kahanu Davis, who's actually like the fourth string wide receiver. So their main group of pass catchers, you mentioned Boyd and Pagan, their two main wide receivers, and neither of them had really caught a lot of passes in college anyway. I think Brady Boyd had something like 20-ish catches, where I think he was at Texas Tech, if I remember right. And I think Pagan coming from UCLA, where I don't think he caught a single pass. But they found a good home here, and they've been good. I don't know if they're like star caliber wide receivers, but they're able to get enough separation. They're able to catch passes pretty reliably. Brady Boyd's got a couple of highlight reel receptions along the sideline. He's pretty good at that catch and toe drag. Is one against either A&M or Vanderbilt. I think it was A&M where he's had this spectacular sideline catch, helped lead to a touchdown for the Aggies, Utah State Aggies against the Texas A&M Aggies. The interesting thing is how they use their running backs in the pass game. They're actually pretty thin at wide receiver. They have two guys, Demeek Starling and Corey Thompson, who are both out for, I think one of them's out for the season and one of them might be out for the season. I think they're holding out hope that he's going to be back, but not for this game. So they lost two guys from the wide receiver room they were expecting to play big snaps. They're suddenly down two pass catchers. They do have Josh Sturzer and Brock Lane at the tight end, a couple of veterans. They're not volume pass catchers, so like they still needed some more people to just go out there and catch a pass, and they've turned to the running backs, Miles Davis and Javen Jacobs. Didn't happen so much against Hawaii, but this year both of them have been involved in the pass game. Like as receivers, they'll split out wide as wide receivers. It's not just catching a screen pass and going, which they will do that. But there's some interesting versatility that they've brought, and at times, some of the earlier teams that Utah State played, the defensive coordinators like didn't know what to do. And so they were playing a lot of base coverages, and that allowed Utah State to kind of predict what the defense was doing and exploit that. That's where we're able to put up some big points against some of these teams. I think now that we're halfway through the season, some teams are going to catch up a little bit and realize what the Aggies are doing. I think San Jose will have plenty of film and they'll have a game plan, but it is kind of interesting the way they use their skill position players, where they have like 5 or 6 skill position players that they'll play total, and they fill in all the spots, all the wide receiver, all the running back, tight end, and they just use those same 5 or 6 guys, and then Bryson Barnes, you throw him in as a runner, and it's a fairly small group of big playmakers, but they can do a little bit of everything.
100%. As far as this defense is concerned, I know, I look at some guys and I see, Ike Larson's back in the lineup, at the safety position. I thought just one of the more underrated players in the Mountain West over the years. But, John Miller, he's kind of been the star of the show from a statistical perspective. 5.5 sacks, leads the team, tied for first in the Mountain West in that category. He's been a tackle machine as well. I look at a guy like Noah Avenger, who came from New Mexico, where Mendenhall was last year. I think just a solid name in the secondary. Just where do you value this defense right now? I know the numbers, it could always be a little bit skewed right now, especially, as we kind of, get into the Mountain West play. I know we're 3 games in here, but just because of all like the non-conference schedules and, the strength of the schedules and whatnot. But what do you like from this defense right now? Is this kind of at par from what you had? Because they show some spots, but they're giving up some points as well.
Well, the part that I like, and this is where they're improved from last year, and it kind of goes back to where I said there's some good fundamentals being set, but there's some things they need to work on. And that almost kind of exemplifies the defense, where tackling wise, last year they were a mess. They could not tackle. They'd give up so many yards after the catch. It was hard to watch. This year, they're actually one of the better teams in the country at defending yards after the catch, preventing extra yards after contact in the run game. They tackle well. They swarm to the ball fairly well. But there's still some things they're working on, because in the pass game, like they let Mike Alejado get whatever he wanted. Vanderbilt, I know they're an amazing offense, but the season high for Vanderbilt was 55 points, and they did that against the Aggies. I think Texas A&M, either their first or second highest number of points. They're another lead offense, but they had pretty much their best offensive outing against the Aggies. There have been some positives. For instance, Air Force, who's been a really good offense, actually their lowest offensive output was against the Aggies. So it's kind of interesting there, where we've seen some positives and negatives from the Aggies. And so there's just some things to fine tune. Coverages, they have busted coverages a little too often. Sometimes they're not getting to the quarterback enough, and that gives them enough time that they can pick apart the defense. That's kind of a big thing that happened with Alejado, was he had whatever time he wanted to find one of the 10 wide receivers that Hawaii has, the amazing receiving core they have there. So if they're able to get to the quarterback and kind of play that complementary football in the pass game, they're not a horrible defense. But the problem is they're not executing at the higher levels consistently. And so that just ends up fairly consistently leading to teams having success against the Aggies. And to be honest, I think San Jose, unless Utah State shows a big improvement, they should find some holes in the defense eventually too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can say the same about San Jose State's defense.
Yeah,
right? Like they have Derek Odom as defensive coordinator. He's been really good for San Jose State. He's one of the longest active, assistant coaches as far as staying in one place for so long. But his defense has a lot of youth on the back end. Jalen Boehner, he's got 3 interceptions the last 2 games, but if you really kind of dive into some things, like you can poke some holes and be like, hey, like he's given up a little too many explosives. They're starting a redshirt freshman, Jalen Thomas, where He had some good stuff at the start of the year, but I think he's given up a little too much yardage to some of the wide receivers right now. I know he's had a couple breakdowns. There's just a little too many breakdowns, I think, for a lot of people's liking out here in San Jose. Wyoming got away with just throwing a little dump down for what should be probably like 5 yards on a 5-yard gain, and it turns into a 50-yard gain. They had one of those for Stanford to the Stanford running back, Micah Ford, and he had like an 80-yard catch and run on a wheel route. So there's definitely some too many breakdowns for San Jose State's defense. Their linebacker play, I thought, has been solid. Like Jordan Pollard, I thought had a good first half last week versus Wyoming, just kind of all over the place on the field. Nofa Funa, their nose tackle, he's been terrific up the middle for the Spartan defense. But just some, I think some headlines that I think people need to recognize here just for SJSU. Obviously, Walker E gets banged up. His status is up in the air as far as if he doesn't go, who's going to play. Xavier Ward or Tama Amasone. Amasone, he's kind of been their gadget guy. True freshman, that is. Threw his first career pass last week in the game, versus Wyoming. And Xavier Ward, I mean, this is a fifth-year senior, but he's never made a start in his career. He was at Washington State, was at Sam Houston State. This is year 2 for him in San Jose. He's kind of been in the pipeline, but has never really gotten his opportunity. We saw some things, last week versus Wyoming where we really saw him as a passer for the first time. And, I just wonder what, just that scenario was. And from a play calling perspective, for Craig Stutzman, for San Jose State, I don't know if they wanted to unleash too much. I think they were just trying to, kind of salt the game away and, play, the clock, and that didn't work out for them. So keep an eye on the injury report on the San Jose side of things. And Danny Scudero, their star wide receiver who's leading the country in receiving yards, got banged up in the game. He's questionable as well. And, he had 4 touchdowns last week for SJSU. That was a Spartan record as far as most touchdowns in a game. He's got over 800 receiving yards on the year. He had 25 targets last week, Jason. I mean, this guy is
That's
craziness. And this guy could be out on Friday night. That's a problem.
Yeah, because I don't see Utah State having much in the way of tools to stop Scudero. So like that would be absolutely massive against San Jose and for Utah State, because that is a guy I don't see how anyone in the Mountain West is going to stop him. And I don't know how you guys get away with having Nick Nash and then you go, Triple Crown winner and then you get Danny Scudero. It's I don't know. It doesn't feel fair, but obviously doing a fantastic job there developing wide receivers. So hopefully he's in the game, because I wouldn't like to see this game decided in part due to an injury to a star player.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. If Scudero is out, I think the name everyone should have circled as far as the wide receiver to step up, Matthew Coleman. He'll probably take over at the slot position if Scudero's out, which is obviously where all the wide receivers feast in this offense. He had 6 receptions for 40 yards last week. We've really seen him that he can be kind of that guy where he can have that significant target share and, go off for like over 100 yards and, 10 plus receptions. So that's the guy that I could see be heavily relied upon if Scudero is out, with, Kyrie Schultz and Leland Smith complementing him behind him. Jason, you're out there, covering Utah State. I'm going to ask you, how significant is the home field advantage in this one on a Friday night with that student section?
It's going to be good. The student section comes out. I know there's been some lower attendance numbers, but the environment is always good. The numbers may not be big, but the feeling is big. They're loud. The student section really gets into it. It'll be interesting with it being on a Friday. Just how much it's going to play a factor. I think it'll still be fairly well attended, and it'll be kind of the last game before things start getting really cold up here in Logan. where sometimes that'll drive the fans away from the later games. So I think it'll be decently well attended. I think the home field advantage will certainly help, especially where Utah State's been on the road. I don't think they've played a home game in about a month, so it'll be a true homecoming for them. So I think that'll at least play a solid factor where it gives them maybe a little more energy, especially in the second half where they've struggled a little bit.
For sure. Just some interesting storylines that I have circled for this one. Obviously, offensive coordinator for Utah State, Kevin McGivern, playing SJSU for the first time since departing, was out in San Jose for 7 years as far as the play calling duties. Last year, he was the wide receivers coach, but during the Brent Brennan era, that was his offense that he was navigating to really just re-bolster and rebuild the Spartan football program was a big part of that. I know the coaches presently have the coaching staff have a lot of respect for him. So interested to see that matchup. Anthony Garcia, he's kind of been their gadget guy for Utah State this year. I asked our defensive coordinator Derek Odom about him. Because he was at San Jose State in 2023, redshirted, didn't play a year, followed Brent Brennan to Arizona, didn't play there. Now he's finally getting on the field, and he's thrown a passing touchdown. He's ran one in. He had 7 receptions. I'm curious, for a guy for someone that watches him every week and obviously has the tabs on Utah State. Is he kind of like a wild card in this game, or do you see him getting involved in some capacity for the Aggie offense?
Yeah, usually it's some trick play. He does have the 7 receptions. A lot of those were early because I think he was most like a wide receiver against UTEP. Although I think, if I remember correctly, they ran a 2-point conversion or 2 with him in there. So anytime they want to shake things up, do a gadget play, they'll have him out there, and then all of a sudden he's throwing a touchdown pass or he's got 2 touchdown passes, a rushing touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. He has basically every kind of score except the one his position usually does, which is a receiving touchdown. So it's very likely that they do something with him, be it special teams or on offense. It's just to guess what they're going to do because it's usually been a little different each time.
For sure. And then, just one a little bit more side note here. I asked Coach Ken about this because his son's on the Utah State staff. Ali'i Niumatalolo, tight ends coach, senior analyst. I asked him, hey, what's that dynamic going to be like, knowing that your son's on the other sideline? He said, yeah, it's going to be a little weird. He kind of jokingly said that we haven't talked all week, which is pretty funny. Like, we're not talking on game week, but I don't know, for Coach Ken, Niumatalolo, such a family, type man, embraced the family culture out in San Jose. That's definitely a matchup, where, he's not going to be thinking about it, but it's definitely on the back of his mind in a sense. I just wanted to throw that one out there, for just the audience that, his son's on the side there.
Yeah, it's interesting thing, and if I recall right, Bronco and Ken are pretty good friends.
Yeah.
So they obviously have a ton of respect for each other. So it's going to be a game where you got 2 coaches that respect and know each other a lot, and sometimes that makes it even better. A friendly rivalry in a sense. They're both competitive. They're not going to go out there and lose, but at the end of the day, whoever wins, they're going to both shake hands, chat, have a laugh, and it's what sports is all about. We're supposed to have fun out here, along with being competitive.
100%. Jason, before we get you out of here, just kind of your overarching, keys to the game here for Utah State. You kind of mentioned that this is a game that they need to get for, bowl eligibility. What's kind of the path to a victory here for the Aggies?
I think establishing some consistency really on offense and defense, but I think 2 big things, because I highlighted these as the 2 biggest weaknesses against Hawaii where they didn't perform. And we'll need to see them do it against San Jose. One is pass protection. Utah State has had one of the worst pass protection units in college football. They had been getting better against Air Force McNeese, slight regression against Vanderbilt, and then kind of a big regression against Hawaii. They need to get back to having good pass protection, making sure Bryson Barnes doesn't have to run around. If they protect him well, Bryson Barnes can do whatever he wants, and he can put up big numbers. And Utah State's run game has been fairly consistent, but with, you take a sack on first down, then the run game kind of gets pushed to the side. So they haven't been able to utilize a decent run game as much as I think they'd like, where Miles Davis is averaging like 6.5 yards per carry this season. But then on defense, it's basically the exact opposite. Get to the quarterback. John Miller, you mentioned him. He does have a lot of sacks. He comes on a lot of blitzes from that inside linebacker position, but he's mostly been it, and they're not generating consistent pressure, even though they like to blitz a lot. So if they can get some more consistent pressure on the quarterback, then their defense actually ends up taking a big step forward, where they go from being pretty bad to kind of decent. They can stop some teams if they're able to generate some pressure on the quarterback. So if they do those two things, it'll help unlock the defense, which has struggled, and it'll truly unlock the offense, where we've seen them be elite when they do protect Bryson Barnes.
As far as my keys to the game, you got to keep Bryson Barnes in check if you're San Jose State defense. I mean, you can't, especially on third down. We've seen, San Jose State face a mobile quarterback from Idaho and Joshua Wood. He had a 3rd and 13 with his legs, when all of his reads were pretty much blown up. So third down defense, but in particular with Bryson Barnes, because if you have everything covered, he can extend plays. And I think that goes hand in hand with just limiting the explosives, not only over the top, but, just making tackles. Wyoming's final touchdown last week was set up because their backup running back evaded 5 tackles. So you got to record on first contact against anybody, just completing the play there. And I think for San Jose State offensively in this game, I think regardless of the quarterback, establish a ground game. I know they kind of got away from it last week. Wyoming's front, I think, is underrated, but, they had some success versus New Mexico, and look, it resulted in a victory. If you could kind of play keep away versus this Utah State offense, keep them off the field, because we've seen them. They can be explosive this season. SJSU could kind of, limit the game that way, especially if they have a touchdown 10-point lead in this game. Relying on that ground game, which is something that we haven't really said too much out here in San Jose, could be significant. And most importantly, make some field goals. We're going to see San Jose State's got an active kicker competition again this week between Dennis Lynch and Matthias Brown. So whoever's on the place kicking duties obviously won that battle for what's just been a crazy scenario that maybe a lot of people weren't expecting out here in the Bay Area.
You can't afford to leave points on the board in what will probably be a high-scoring game for both these teams.
Yeah, I would say this one's going to be high scoring. I would probably say the way the two offenses are humming right now.
Definitely.
I would expect that. Jason, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're busy out there in the state of Utah. Where can people find what you're doing out there, with Utah State?
And so you can find me on cashvalleydaily.com. That's where a lot of my written content comes. And then I'm on 106.9 The Fan on radio. And you can find it on podcast feeds and whatnot, Full Court Press. Or if you want to just find all that through my social media, it's at @jaywalker_sports. Got to remember the underscore because there's someone who doesn't. It's also Jason Walker, but he's in Montana, so you'll be finding the wrong Jason Walker. But his content's good too, just if you have a taste for Montana sports.
There you go. Yeah, I know. Montana sports, the college football scene's pretty big out there.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Jason, thank you so much. Great stuff today. San Jose State and Utah State should be a good one Friday night. Definitely looking forward to the matchup and looking forward to, crossing paths down the road.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And hopefully the Spartans and Aggies can meet even beyond the Mountain West era, because we need these schools to stay in touch. I know the conferences aren't happy with each other, but hopefully the teams can stick together. You gotta unite all these G5 schools.
I'm with you there 100%. That will do it for this episode of the Sports Sentiment. Once again, I am your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.